There was a moment when it seemed like Jean-Claude Van Damme had pulled off the rarest Hollywood trick of all, a second rise. From voice roles to viral fame to a long-awaited return to blockbuster action, he looked energized, grateful, almost reborn. Even the statues built in his honor felt like symbols of a man finally at peace with his past. But the truth was far more fragile. Behind the cameras, out of the spotlight, a series of choices and accusations began rewriting the narrative he'd worked so hard to rebuild. And now, at 64, Van Damme's journey has taken a turn so tragic, so unexpected, that it's left even his most loyal supporters stunned. The ordinary childhood. Behind a legend. Jean-Claude Van Damme didn't come from a showbiz dynasty or a long line of actors. His childhood was surprisingly ordinary. His mother worked as a florist, and his father was an accountant. Growing up in a bilingual home, French on one side, Dutch on the other, he didn't have anyone to guide him through English. Instead, he learned the language through the bright animated world of cartoons, with shows like The Flintstones becoming his earliest teachers. Over time, he didn't just learn English, he developed fluency in several languages, hinting early on at the wide range of skills he would eventually carry into adulthood. Born and raised in Brussels, Van Damme grew into a multi-talented powerhouse: actor, martial artist, filmmaker, and fight choreographer. He became one of the defining faces of martial arts cinema and played a huge role in introducing the genre to Western audiences. But with fame came a nickname he wasn't exactly fond of. Fans and the media proudly called him the Muscles from Brussels, but he found it more embarrassing than flattering, joking that it made him sound like a sea creature rather than an action icon. His muscles didn't come naturally. As a child, he was small, shy, and, according to his father, not nearly strong enough. That blunt assessment pushed him into karate school at just 10 years old. What started as a tough love decision quickly lit a spark in him. He immersed himself in kickboxing, taekwondo, Muay Thai, and weightlifting, determined to build himself from the ground up. By age 15, he was already competing in karate tournaments and winning. Still, martial arts weren't his only focus. At 16, he surprised everyone by enrolling in ballet classes. He believed ballet was one of the most demanding athletic disciplines in the world, capable of transforming strength, balance, and discipline. He trained in ballet for 5 years, never shying away from the decision, even while later joining the ranks of action titans like Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Ballet, he insisted, played a key role in shaping his precision and flexibility, the very qualities that propelled him to the highest levels of karate. Earning a black belt in karate is no small feat. Only a small percentage of students ever reach that level. But Van Damme rose through the ranks quickly, securing his black belt at 18 after years of competing in semi-contact championships. And while he continued to hone his skills, he embraced yet another discipline: bodybuilding. As he pushed himself to physical extremes, his efforts paid off with the title of Mr. Belgium in a national bodybuilding competition. By the time he stepped into full-scale competition, his record spoke for itself. In semi-contact matches, he delivered 44 knockouts with only 4 losses. In full-contact bouts, he claimed 18 knockouts and suffered only a single defeat. One of his most astonishing achievements came during a 3-day karate tournament, where he beat 25 opponents and secured second place. His talent was undeniable, his discipline unmatched. Yet even with all these accomplishments, there were still plenty of people who doubted he could ever turn his martial arts success into something bigger. At just 20 years old, Jean-Claude Van Damme stepped into one of the most defining moments of his early career. He was preparing to face a familiar opponent, his former teammate Patrick Tugels, at the Forest Nationals in Belgium. Their history was tense. Tugels had already beaten Van Damme twice by decision, while Van Damme had only managed a single win in return. Most people believed the outcome was already written. The pressure was enormous. and Van Damme knew his reputation and the direction of his future hung entirely on this match. What happened in the ring stunned everyone. Van Damme delivered a spectacular performance, defeating Tuchels by TKO in the first round. A brutal kick to the nose ended the fight almost instantly. It was the perfect underdog victory, the kind that instantly changes the trajectory of a fighter's career. Although he would go on to earn more victories, Van Damme has always looked back on this particular match as his most unforgettable moment. It was the day he truly earned his place in the world of kickboxing, and his popularity skyrocketed as fans rallied behind him. But success only fueled his ambition. Before long, he realized he wanted more than medals and recognition. He wanted a new challenge. He wanted acting. Despite having no acting experience and little formal education, he managed to appear as an uncredited extra in a Belgian-French drama. The role was tiny, but it planted a new dream in his mind. Now he needed to figure out how to merge his kickboxing identity with the world of film. The first step was rebranding. Up until then, he competed under his birth name, Jean-Claude Van Varenberg. It didn't exactly roll off the tongue, so he adopted the sharper, more memorable name Van Damme, borrowing it from a friend. With a new name and a new direction, he began plotting his move to America, where he hoped to blend his physical talent with Hollywood opportunity. Of course, a dream that big needed funding. Before leaving Europe, he opened a fitness center in Brussels called California Gym, located, strangely enough, right next to a cemetery. He still technically owns it today, though he plays no active role in running it. At the time, that gym, along with a string of odd modeling jobs, became his main source of income. Every dollar he earned was set aside for one goal: getting across the Atlantic. When he finally made it to the United States, he arrived with about $5,000 and almost no English. Things unraveled quickly. The money disappeared faster than he expected, and soon he found himself homeless, living in his car, sleeping on the street, and stealing food just to get by. He worked every odd job he could find, from driving a limousine to laying carpets to delivering pizzas. It was a period defined by hardship, survival, and relentless determination. But even during those darkest days, he stayed focused on his dream, and eventually, his persistence paid off. He caught the attention of the right person, someone who noticed his talent, his look, and his dedication. From that moment on, everything began to change, where Van Damme's troubles really began. By 1992, Jean-Claude Van Damme was already sitting comfortably among Hollywood's top action stars. That year, he teamed up with acclaimed Hong Kong director John Woo for the film Hard Target. Universal Pictures was pleased with the director's original cut, but Van Damme wasn't nearly as satisfied. Test audiences had noticed something unusual. The movie didn't feel like a Van Damme vehicle. Instead, the spotlight seemed to belong to the two villains, played by Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo. Their performances were so compelling that Universal even started to consider the idea of giving the duo their own prequel. But Van Damme held the power of final cut, and he used it. Stepping in with full authority, he removed nearly 30 minutes of footage, most of it centered around Henriksen and Vosloo. John Woo, who had poured his signature style into the film, was left frustrated and disappointed. He later spoke openly about how disheartening it was to see so much of his work stripped away, criticizing Van Damme for what he felt was an inflated sense of self-importance. The incident became a defining moment for Woo's Hollywood experience. In interviews afterward, he often reflected on the intense interference directors faced from major producers and high-profile stars in the American studio system. But even with all the conflict behind the scenes, Hard Target still landed strong at the box office. That commercial success only seemed to reinforce Van Damme's belief that he knew best. Not long after, he delivered another major hit with Time Cop, the biggest financial success of his entire career. With each victory, his confidence surged, and so did his ego. As he reached his mid-30s, Van Damme was fully immersed in the Hollywood lifestyle, and the darker side of fame soon caught up with him. Like many stars of the era, he developed a severe cocaine addiction. His habit spiraled so far out of control that he was reportedly spending around $10,000 a week, nearly 10 grams a day. The drug use quickly began to affect his professionalism, turning him into a constant disruption on set. The problems became especially visible during the production of Street Fighter. At the time, Van Damme had been offered roles in both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but he chose the former largely because it came with a higher paycheck. Another factor often overlooked was that in 1993, the Street Fighter series was much more popular than Mortal Kombat. Street Fighter II alone had sold over 14 million copies. Yet once filming began, his personal struggles overshadowed everything else. According to the film's director, Van Damme repeatedly derailed shooting by disappearing from set during drug binges. The crew found themselves rewriting scenes on the fly just to keep the production moving without him. Van Damme later admitted openly that he was spending over $10,000 a week on cocaine at the time. What made this downfall even more tragic was that earlier in his career, he had successfully battled the same addiction. Back then, he was so determined to make his films succeed that he fought harder than anyone to stay disciplined. But by the height of his fame, the support system around him had collapsed. The studio even assigned someone to keep him under control. But instead of helping, that person became his partner in excess, sharing in his habits and enabling the chaos. The substance abuse didn't stop with cocaine. Van Damme also struggled with prescription medications and heavy drinking. Eventually, his behavior caught up with him in a very public way when he was arrested in Hollywood for driving under the influence. He received 3 years of probation, was required to attend a mandatory driving class, had his license suspended for 90 days, and paid a $1,200 fine. Unfortunately for him, this was only one of several destructive paths he found himself on during this turbulent chapter of his life. At this stage in Jean-Claude Van Damme's life, it felt like every move he made was another stumble in the wrong direction. Rumors began to swirl, fast and loud, about his growing attraction to his Street Fighter co-star, Kylie Minogue. And the ironic twist? The affair did absolutely nothing to tarnish Kylie's image on set. While Van Damme often arrived with a bottle of whiskey in hand and an ego so inflated that it turned the crew against him, Kylie was the complete opposite. She won everyone over by treating the crew to burgers, drinks, and genuine kindness. They adored her. For years, decades even, Van Damme denied anything had happened between them. But eventually, he admitted the truth. He called their affair beautiful lovemaking and said it was basically unavoidable, given how stunning she was. And the reason he stayed silent for so long made perfect sense. At the time, he was newly married to his fourth wife, Darcy Lapierre. A detail that adds even more irony is that Lapierre herself had been his mistress during his previous marriage. Infidelity was already part of the pattern. Lapierre went their entire marriage unaware of his affair with Kylie. He didn't publicly confess until 20 years later. Cheating on a brand new bride was bad enough, but their situation was far more complicated. Shortly after the wedding, Lapierre became pregnant. And this is where Van Damme's recurring habit began to show itself clearly. Just as he'd done before, he drifted away from his expecting wife, choosing the thrill of filming overseas over family. He spent his time in Thailand working on action movies, partying, and soaking in attention from fans and groupies. When he finally returned home, there was no confrontation, no accountability, just a quiet slide back into domestic life, as if nothing had happened. Their marriage limped along for another 3 years before Lapierre finally walked away. For most people, 4 marriages would have been the limit. Not for Van Damme. He still had one more wedding left in him. There's no denying Van Damme's reputation as a ladies' man. His romantic history reads like a whirlwind. 5 marriages total. The first ended in Brussels. The second was over almost as quickly as it began. Mixed in with the vows and divorces were children, affairs, scandals, and a track record of impulsive decisions. His relationships seemed to switch directions as quickly as he changed film roles. One of the most surprising twists involved his third wife, Gladys Portuguese. They married in 1987, but the relationship fell apart when Van Damme had yet another affair. He went on to marry, and later divorce, the very woman he cheated with. But in a dramatic turn only Hollywood could appreciate, he found his way back to Portuguese, and the two remarried. Against all odds, they're still together today. 5 marriages in just 19 years. It's a staggering timeline. And the surprises didn't stop there. Given his chaotic romantic life, many people assume he must have a large number of children. But surprisingly, he has only 3. At least 3 he publicly acknowledges. 2 with his third wife, and 1 with his fourth. All of them carry his real last name, and each has gravitated toward careers in entertainment, mirroring their father's path. However, the family story wasn't without turmoil. His relationship with his youngest child was heavily strained, largely due to the bitter, highly publicized divorce from that child's mother. And when it comes to Darcy Lapierre, things took a deeply troubling turn. She accused him of repeatedly hurting her during violent outbursts, claiming that one incident was so severe it sent her to the hospital. That moment became the breaking point. Lapierre filed for a restraining order, saying she feared for her safety. She sought full custody of their 2-year-old son and demanded $150,000 per month in child support, along with nearly $300,000 in legal fees. What made the situation even more alarming was that Van Damme had never been known for violence before. The sudden shift hinted at something far more complicated happening behind closed doors. Something that suggested deeper problems than anyone on the outside realized. At this point in his life, Jean-Claude Van Damme was spiraling fast. His substance use had reached such dangerous heights that he later recalled a moment where he got so high, he felt himself leave his own body. It terrified him. He tried checking into rehab, but he lasted barely a week. By then, he needed huge amounts of drugs just to feel stable. The version of Van Damme the world knew, the disciplined martial artist, the rising action star, was slipping away. And it wasn't just his marriages that were falling apart. His entire career was starting to crack. Ironically, this was happening right when he was at the peak of his success. Universal Studios saw him as a golden ticket and reached out with what seemed like a dream offer, a 3-film deal worth $12 million per movie. For most actors, that would be a life-changing opportunity. But Van Damme wasn't thinking clearly. His ego had blown up. Every project he touched was making money, and he started to believe he was invincible. So instead of taking the deal, he demanded more than double the amount. In his mind, he should be paid on the same level as Jim Carrey, the highest-earning comedy star in the world at the time. Looking back, he admitted he was exhausted, overworked, and caught up in the idea of beating the system. He knew it was a foolish move, one that would come back to haunt him. Universal's response was immediate. They didn't negotiate, they didn't argue. They simply laughed and ended the conversation. And in Hollywood, moments like that travel fast. Word spread, and suddenly studios didn't want to touch him. Just like that, he went from headlining blockbusters to being blacklisted from major productions. For the next decade, Van Damme found himself drifting toward low-budget action films, the kind released quietly on DVD. He even started directing some of them, likely because he sensed where his career was heading. Still, he had one last real shot at a comeback, a film called Double Team. But even that hope fell apart. The original script had been a gritty, intense story, set on an isolated island off Greece, a hidden sanctuary for CIA agents. The central plot followed an agent trapped there, trying to escape so he could confront an enemy the agency was secretly protecting. That was the version Van Damme signed on for. He wanted a tough, uncompromising action film. Then the script was rewritten from top to bottom. Only a tiny fragment of the original story survived. The final product felt exaggerated, stylized, almost cartoonish. And though Van Damme wasn't happy with the changes, he didn't push back. He couldn't afford to. His recent films had all flopped. Double Team felt like one of his last chances to stay in mainstream cinema. But the film tanked. Critics tore it apart. It became the last Van Damme movie to receive a major theatrical release in the United States. After that, for the next 10 years, he was back to low-budget action movies and direct-to-DVD projects. His personal life continued to unravel. He started crashing cars into nightclubs, clashing with paparazzi, and increasing his daily intake of substances. Every time he seemed to hit rock bottom, he found a way to drop even lower. Then, finally, something changed. Once he gained a better understanding of his own mental health, he found a renewed determination to turn his life around. He stopped using substances entirely. Traditional rehab hadn't worked for him, so he made an extreme decision. He quit cold turkey and forced himself through the pain. He trained constantly, sweating through withdrawal and rebuilding himself physically and mentally. Against all odds, it worked. He got healthy, and with his strength and clarity returning, he shifted his focus toward rebuilding his career. But this time, he wanted the world to see who he really was. And to do that, he chose a method that pulled back every layer of the action hero persona and exposed the real man behind it. At 64, the tragedy of Jean-Claude Van Damme is beyond heartbreaking. As the mid-2000s rolled in, Jean-Claude Van Damme started popping up in a handful of smaller but still memorable roles. One standout moment came when he stepped into the world of animation with Kung Fu Panda 2. In the film, he brought to life Master Croc, the smooth martial arts-wielding reptile who fit right into the franchise's high-energy universe. During a behind-the-scenes conversation, Van Damme shared a hilarious moment from his first meeting with the filmmakers. When they told him he'd be playing a crocodile, he couldn't help but joke about the logistics. With those tiny legs, how was he supposed to deliver his signature kicks? The production team reassured him that Master Croc would rely heavily on his tail, and the whole studio burst into laughter. Director Jennifer Yu Nelson later explained that bringing Van Damme into the Kung Fu Panda world just made sense. A major martial arts series needed a touch of JCVD energy, and she'd always imagined him perfectly embodied as a crocodile. But his biggest move of this era wasn't on a movie set. It came when he invited cameras into his home for the reality series Jean-Claude Van Damme, Behind Closed Doors. Filmed in a raw, fly-on-the-wall style and featuring his wife and kids, the show offered an unfiltered look at his life. It built buzz, won viewers over, and helped jumpstart a major career comeback. That comeback kicked into high gear when he finally joined the action-packed juggernaut The Expendables 2. After previously turning down a role in the first film, he was genuinely grateful for the second invitation and excited to step back into a large-scale action blockbuster. With a $100 million budget and a star-studded cast, the film exploded at the box office, earning over $315 million worldwide. It marked his official return to big-screen dominance. Then, in November 2013, Van Damme found himself back in headlines, but not for a movie. It was all thanks to a jaw-dropping Volvo commercial. To demonstrate the stability of the brand's heavy-duty trucks, he performed his famous split between two massive vehicles moving backward in perfect synchronization, all set to the soft, ethereal sound of Enya's Only Time. The internet went wild. The ad racked up more than 118 million views on YouTube and helped boost Volvo's truck sales that very same month. Behind the scenes, Van Damme admitted he was nervous about the stunt. In his view, performing something that dangerous always comes with real risk. But once the cameras rolled and the music played, he locked in and completed the entire thing in just one take. As his resurgence continued, his hometown paid him a heartfelt tribute by unveiling a life-sized bronze statue in one of his iconic martial arts poses. For Van Damme, the statue symbolized the journey of a kid from the streets who held on to his dreams. Later, another statue popped up, this time in a village in Azerbaijan called Van Damme, which shared nearly the same name as his own. True to form, Van Damme wasn't done poking fun at his own image. He stepped into a fictionalized version of himself in the film JCVD, and years later doubled down on the concept in the 2016 Amazon series Jean-Claude Van Damme. In the show, he plays himself, only with a twist. His entire acting career is a cover for his real work as a secret agent. The series blended comedy and action, while giving him room to reflect on fame and reinvention. The director, Peter Atencio, later shared a story that showed just how deeply the role connected with Van Damme. At one point on set, the actor pulled him aside, genuinely concerned, wondering if the entire production was actually an intervention. Atencio had to reassure him that it was, in fact, a real show, just one that hit closer to home than expected. But no chapter of Van Damme's life is complete without a little turbulence. In 2009, while in Thailand, he met a young Ukrainian dancer at a private club and began a secret affair, despite being married to his fifth wife, Gladys. The relationship grew serious enough that he made quiet trips to Ukraine to see her. For years, they kept the affair hidden, even having her pose as his assistant at exclusive events. Eventually, the truth surfaced. Gladys discovered the infidelity and initiated divorce proceedings for the second time. Van Damme cared for the woman he'd been seeing, but he also wanted to save his family, and he was faced with a difficult choice. Gladys agreed to stay with him, but only under strict conditions, including the purchase of a new mansion and a list of extravagant gifts. By 2016, Van Damme ended the long-running affair and remained with his wife. Yet even with the scandal resolved, it left many wondering whether the action star had always struggled with the temptations of fame and attention. Now, fast forward a bit, because in more recent years, Van Damme found himself tangled in yet another scandal. And this one carried an even heavier punch than the rest. It started on a night out in Brussels, inside this ultra-exclusive champagne bar where the crowd is usually thick with money, status, and ego. That's where he met a woman literally half his age. The chemistry between them was instant. They were laughing, flirting, and vibing like the night was built just for them. But the mood shifted when Jean-Claude tried to take things further. He asked her to come back to his place. She said no, and instead of accepting that, he went looking for a workaround. This is where the pattern shows itself again. Van Damme, decades deep into fame, excess, and a long history of stepping outside his marriage, seemed to be operating from that old action star ego. Even in his 60s, he was still in shape, still charming, still convinced he could make things go his way. And when this young woman didn't play along, he treated it like a challenge instead of a boundary. Witnesses say he followed her, tipsy and trying to get away, into the bathroom. Inside that cramped stall, he tried to force her into something she clearly didn't want. She managed to escape, stumbling out into the street half-naked, crying and calling for help. And unfortunately, this wasn't the only time his behavior crossed the line. Another disturbing allegation involved not just him, but 3 other people. In this separate incident, a woman claimed she was lured into a hotel room by her own boyfriend and another woman, with Van Damme waiting inside. According to the report, the moment she stepped in, he allegedly pushed her onto the bed and climbed on top of her, while the boyfriend and the other woman were engaged in their own act just inches away. Even though Van Damme had supposedly gotten control over his earlier substance issues, it was clear he was still leaning too heavily on alcohol. That liquid courage that kept fueling these reckless choices. Then came April 2025, and the allegations escalated into something even more serious. A criminal complaint was filed with DCOT, the Romanian division that handles organized crime and trafficking cases. This complaint accused Van Damme of having sexual relations with 5 Romanian women during a trip to Cannes. Women who were allegedly trafficked by a criminal group led by Marital, a Romanian modeling agency owner. The accusation wasn't just that Van Damme slept with them, but that he knew they were being exploited. Adrian Cuculis, the lawyer for one of the alleged victims, spoke publicly about it. He said these women were in a vulnerable state, falling under Article 182 of the Romanian Criminal Code, the section dealing with exploitation. He went further, claiming there was no question Van Damme understood exactly what was happening. According to him, witnesses described a Cannes event organized by Van Damme, where several Romanians under investigation for pimping allegedly offered him 5 Romanian models for sex. Cuculis insisted that Van Damme accepted these women, knowing full well they were being exploited. Naturally, this blew up across headlines worldwide, and Van Damme's camp responded quickly. His agent, Patrick Goavec, issued a statement pushing back hard. He said they were aware of the articles but called the claims grotesque and completely false. Goavec emphasized that Van Damme wouldn't be fueling a rumor he considered absurd and unfounded, making it clear they were denying everything. Now, while all this is swirling, the industry is buzzing with speculation that the action star might finally be ready to call it quits. After a career spanning over 6 decades, packed with scandals, comebacks, and more than 65 films, it makes sense that retirement might be on the horizon. But fans don't need to worry just yet. Word is, he's working on one last major project before he finally hangs up those signature martial arts kicks for good. Now, Van Damme is gearing up for what he's calling his final action film, and the title couldn't be more fitting. What's My Name? The story follows a man who wakes up from a coma with no memory of who he is. From there, he's thrown into a series of intense battles as he fights his way back to the truth about his identity. It has all the ingredients of a classic action setup, but with a twist that fans will appreciate. A major part of the film blends in autobiographical elements from Van Damme's real life and career. For longtime followers, that alone makes the project worth watching. And this isn't the first time he's gone down that introspective, self-referential road. What's My Name? Actually marks the 3rd time he has stepped into a storyline that mirrors his own experiences. Before his big resurgence with The Expendables 2, he starred in JCVD, playing a version of himself caught in the middle of a bank heist. That movie peeled back the curtain on his personal and professional struggles and earned strong reviews. Clearly, audiences are still drawn to the complicated journey that shaped him, which makes this final film feel like the right way for him to close out his legacy. But his idea of retirement looks nothing like the over-the-top life he's lived in front of the cameras. Van Damme has spent nearly his entire life on the move. He's been training since childhood, then transitioned into decades of non-stop filming, traveling, and living out of hotel rooms. Being busy is practically part of his DNA. After all that intensity, his retirement plan is surprisingly simple. He wants peace. He wants quiet. He wants a small boat, open water, and the chance to travel the world with his family at a slower, more human pace. Even now, he's still keeping himself in great shape, training regularly, eating clean, and finishing up the last projects on his schedule. He's already traveling more freely, and everywhere he goes, he brings along Lola, his tiny chihuahua, who doubles as his constant companion. For someone who lived life in the fast lane for so long, this softer, quieter chapter feels like the perfect final act to an extraordinary career.